Sorry. And then on the right. We are at this Temple Mount. The third holiest site is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was used as a horse stable by the Crusaders, and there was an Australian student back in about 1966, a Pentecostal student, who felt that this was the place where the temple was to be rebuilt. And he was able to get a can, I think a 5-gallon can of gasoline or something, and there was a hand-carved wooden altar there. Oh, I got the rest of the people. Wait till we're here. I get too anxious to talk and feel pressed. So, this is the Temple Mount, and of course, everything you see was Islamic. It was conquered almost immediately after Omar was appointed. Muhammad died in 632 of food poisoning, and so the first one, Othman, was an original man who was converted, and he died soon after. But then Omar, the great conqueror of all of the Arab world, of Egypt and every place that could be followed. And so the mosque, not a mosque, but the Dome of the Rock was built to his honor to cover the place where, in a dream, Muhammad ascended to heaven in a dream and had an interview with all of the people, and even as Suzanne was telling us that they were waiting on Muhammad to come and pray for them. And so he came to heaven from this in the dream. He never was here. And so this is all to venerate what had been the temple area that started out with the threshing floor of Aruna. The Chronicles passage says Onan, but Onan and Aruna is simply the same name, and it was an offering to the Lord for having taken the census. Gad told him that you have 3 choices for your sin of taking the census, meaning that I'm proud of what I've done, of what I've accomplished. It can be a 3-year period of military reverses, or a 3-month famine, or a 3-day pestilence. He said, well, I will do what God wants, so I'll take the third. And then when he asked Gad what he should do to give an offering to the Lord, it was to buy the threshing floor of Aruna, which was the top of Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah, remember, is where God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, which was necessary, 3 days to get there, and then there was a substitute sacrifice so that his son didn't have to be killed. So Islam was more influenced by Judaism than Christianity. I already told you about the Eastern Gate having been closed 500 years ago to keep the Messiah out, because the Jews felt the Messiah would have to come yet, but he didn't accept the Christian idea that he's already come. So this has changed hands many times, and it's in the early pages, page 9 later, the whole history of what happened to the Holy Land from the time of the exile. And so everything you see is Muslim, and they've maintained this the whole time. There's a mosque up there, and they used to let us go into the rock outcropping where it's believed Muhammad left a footprint when he went on his horse to heaven. And so this is considered Muslim. They will not accept any archaeology because they think that the temple was never here. I remember going to the Eastern Gate on the inside. I stepped over barbed wire, and I knew I did, but they took me before I didn't know any Arabic, and I had violated the top. Well, what did I do? But they think the souls of the dead reside over there, so they don't even want anybody on the inside. For a long time, it seemed incongruous that the Ark of the Covenant would be on top of that rock, but because the Eastern Gate was on the other side, I can show you later, and it was supposed to go straight up. But now they know that it was angular more than this is not due east, that one was, so that there is a carved place inside the size of the Ark of the Covenant, the measurements, and it's thought it sat there. And the top of that area was the Holy of Holies. And so this, where the real separation came is when the Crusades took place, and these soldiers thought, why do we wait to get to the Holy Land to kill the infidel? Let's kill them along the way. And they killed Arabs simply because they were Arabs, and then they made that a horse stable. But this Australian student, a Pentecostal, felt that I can help the temple be rebuilt. And he got in with this gasoline, and there was a 600-year-old hand-carved wooden altar, and he doused it completely and set it ablaze. And of course, he ultimately was caught. But the fire brigade wanted to get up here, and this was too holy a ground to allow them, and the Israelis forced their way on top to try to save the building, and they did. So from that time on, then there was a great cleavage between Islam and Christianity. And so even to this day, I talked to some of you about it, but when it was taken in 1967, immediately the Arab nations, this is the second holiest spot, the Arabs wanted to get it internationalized. Well, Israel didn't want that, because then this place would be governed by the international body, and Israel wanted to maintain control. So they thought they would kill two birds with one stone. They picked up the Turkish idea of Malat, and Malat status meant that you accept whatever has been here before, and it helped them in terms of the Christian missions, so that they would not allow any church to come up here and come to the country and start a new mission, because they are Malat status. Well, when Ariel Sharon came with his guard, that caused a second uprising, and from that time it's been restricted exactly the way they want it done. So the Jews have no ability to change anything, but they do have the guards all the way around, and so they're maintaining, it's like an island inside Israel, because this was taken in 1948, in 1967, and so by now, them having no control, that was an invasion of the temple and of their section of this. And so from that time on, we can't even go into the Dome of the Rock. Interestingly, that King Hussein, before he died, gave $21 million to remake that gold anodized aluminum top. It cost $21 million of his own money, so that it's a massive dome. And so from the time of Abraham, when he was brought here, this was Mount Moriah. And of course, prophetically, it had to be 3 days' journey. So it is known to be where the temple was. And the eastern gate was on the east side, which they built closed so nobody could come in. There is a gate called St. Stephen's Gate. We will be going out of it. It is believed to be where Stephen was stoned. When you go to the Garden Tomb, they're going to say it might have been close to Damascus Gate, and that has all of the needed things around it. That the bus station is where maybe Stephen was stoned. There is a disappearing image of a skull on Skull Hill, but you can see the nose and the eyes, and it changes in the 50 years since I've been here. But in any case, it's unlikely that that's where Jesus was buried. It would be in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But now we're going to note that Judaism had a cleansing rite, so they have one too before going into they even wash their feet before going into any building. This is the mosque, and if you could go in, the first pillar has bullet holes in it, and when King Hussein, the one that died that was over Jordan, was brought here by his grandfather, they killed his grandfather, and he escaped, but the bullet holes are still in that same place. And so that's basically all of the history that I can tell you about it. But they did have a washing of their feet, a washing of their hands before they go in, picked up from Judaism. And all of these arches, you will see when we go up to the dome, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock. This is where they believe the final judgment will take place. There will be counterbalancing scales on these arches, And all of your good deeds will be put in one saucer, all of your bad deeds in the other. If the bad deeds outweigh the good, you go to hell. And if the good deeds outweigh the bad, you go to heaven. There is no need of repentance. The only problem is that a bad deed for them is a good deed for us, and a good deed for them is a bad deed for them. So for us. So they turn the theology around, and they are 7 hells and 7 heavens. And Muhammad went up and then came back to more or less make the authority of his religion. That he's interviewed everybody that's lived that was a saint, and now he's back. Came back to the earth. Any questions on that at all? Yes.
Related to the temple, where does modern scholarship? What's the best estimate as to where the temple actually was up here? And second question is, you made the comment that you think that the Ark of the Covenant is buried under the Dome of the Rock. Why do you think that?
Okay, that came from the archaeologist or the student that took us through what's called the tunnel from the outside going all the way to bedrock. And they found a huge opening inside, which was like a basement approach to come up to the stairs of the temple. And that excavating it, there was another place where the stone being very porous, there are holes like under that rock. There's a huge place where they think the souls of the dead are. They treat it like a mosque, and they go in there to pray. Well, they think that they knew that there were other porous places, and so they were finding a new source, and they were digging feverishly to get to it. And the Muslims found out about it and poured concrete on the other side. Obviously, the city is surrounded by Nebuchadnezzar. There never was an Ark of the Covenant in Herod's time. And they know it's buried because he was under siege. The city was under siege for a year and a half, 18 months. If it had gotten away, is one theory that Jeremiah took it and hid it in Mount Sinai on the way to Egypt, but he went as a prisoner. That's unlikely. The Ethiopians think they have it there. But no one could have gotten out of the Babylonian lines because at that time they had it completely surrounded, and according to Jeremiah, the last loaf of bread was baked, so they had to surrender. So they had to hide it, and they would have buried it. And so they were. The boy was telling me they were digging furiously to get to that direction, and the Arabs put concrete down because it was on their. This is all their land, and they heard them digging under there. So that's why we're almost certain the Ark of the Covenant will be there.
Do you think that they know it's there?
Who?
The Arabs?
Well, they don't want any proof at all. They wouldn't allow archaeology up here, but they didn't want them digging. And it may be a conscious effort to try to prevent even looking for it. It has to be buried.
And where would the temple be?
Now, we know that the temple due east was not, as was formerly thought, when the beautiful gate led up into the courtyard, as we will see, but it's supposed to have led right into the temple. So with the understanding now, this outcropping cut in exactly the measurement of the Ark of the Covenant. The top of the rock was the center of the Holy of Holies. And that
the top of the rock,
inside the building, the top of the rock. That's the highest pinnacle. And I haven't seen it, but they say there is exactly the measurement. So that would be where it sat, apparently.
Wilbur, talk about that corner of Al-Aqsa Mosque being the highest point.
Very good. It's not the Al-Aqsa Mosque, it's the point. The top of the wall is believed to where traditionally that Satan tempted Jesus to throw himself down. Pinnacle of the temple, the pinnacle of the wall. And on the other one is where they had the trumpeter, who, because when they were excavating, they found this rock that said, "To the blowing of the trumpet." And they had to establish the beginning of Sabbath and the close of Sabbath by the sun. And so when it was known that the sun is going to set, the rabbi is up there with his ram's horn. And he has 3 lookouts wherever they were, and he's waiting for them to signal, "I see a star." And so when he had the 3 hands of all 3 stars, he blows the shofar. The Sabbath has begun. This would be on a Friday night at sunset. And and then it would end at the 24 hours later, because each day, and I think they still publish in the paper exactly when the sun rises, so people could know exactly when the next day starts, evening preceding the day. And anything else, stone was found, so that's where he stood for. Then there was a courtyard of the Gentiles, we would be in it. Then inside of that was the court of the Jews. And remember, there was a crowd that thought Timothy had gone into, was it Timothy, I think, gone into, and that was under pain of death. They found in Greek a big carving of stone that under the pain of death, nobody but a Jew was to enter through that. And that was the gate where Peter and John who came, and it was a beggar. And he's begging for money right at that beautiful gate. And Peter says, silver and gold we have none, but what we have we will give to you. That was the containment inside the Jewish gate, or the Jewish quarter. Now this afternoon or this morning when we go to the museum, we will see a 1 to 50-inch model out in the yard. We'll be able to point all of that out as to what this really looked like in the biblical times. So that will be after we leave here. Anything else? Any question? All right, well, let's go and...
So I think it's because I'm going so many times.
The eastern gates are behind these trees, but it's hard to think. But the latest belief is that this was the way it would have been to have the courtyards different from this, and so the top of that rock would have been where the Ark of the Covenant sat, meaning that the sun rising would come straight into the door. Most churches are built facing the east for that reason, the rising sun, and even pagans did that. And we bury from feet to the west and head to the east, so if you come out of your grave, you're looking at the sunrise. I think they normally continue to do that. Maybe I'm wrong. Pardon?
Head to the west. Feet to the east.
Right.
Yeah.
So that
So you sit up and face the sun.
if I didn't say it right, I intended to. I did want to know if you knew that.
Yes.
So we always thought that would be part of the place where the outcropping of bedrock that might have been over there. But the latest thinking as a result of the excavations is that was the Holy of Holies where the rock is. And that's where Abraham would have attempted to sacrifice Isaac, on top of Mount Moriah. Inside.
And for those of us who may be confused about what the rock is, explain what the rock is.
It was simply bedrock, and it was the pinnacle of Mount Moriah. So this is where Abraham brought and attempted to sacrifice Isaac. There would have been dirt much higher then than now, and it's difficult to even understand what occurred. I know that there was a excavation of the space underneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that was called the Portico of Solomon.
Stables.
What?
Stables of Solomon.
Stable. Well, yeah, but below they excavated, and the Arabs, because they wanted to make it a synagogue, not a mosque, threw all of that away. No excavation. They did find some biblical information in some of that. One of them was something from the time of Joash, and now it's believed that was an attempt to find something that really didn't exist. But that's the Garden of Gethsemane and the Mount of Olives over there, which is to the left from there. We'll be going there tomorrow morning so that we'll be able to have our pictures taken of the sun to our backs, and then we'll walk down Hosanna Road. So the Jews think that's where the final judgment will take place. Tens of thousands of tombs are there, and the Arabs believe it's right here. And of course, the Lord's going to come back to maybe this spot. We don't know, but all three religions believe that this is the place of judgment and the return of a Messiah, but their Messiah will be the Antichrist. And that appears to be, according to Joel Rosenberg, the the 12th Imam, which will reappear. He disappeared, went into occultation. Nobody knows what happened to him. And Ahmadinejad thinks he's the John the Baptist to lead him in. And so that's why Iran is becoming so pressing to events and doing their best to try to get in control. And he believes, Rosenberg in his trilogy, that this Imam will break the cleavage that existed from the death of Muhammad, and that will all be a united force now. One thing certain, when you read any uprising of an Arab, it's like the Muslims have one giant wheel in the world. The hub is right here. And anything that happens here is felt all the way to the extreme of the Muslim belief. And we have one missionary, a graduate of our school, that is now in a Muslim section of China learning the language, and she's alone. She believed God called her to do it. But it's very difficult to convert Islamic people unless you get them away, because they will kill you if they think you've been converted. The fundamentalists will, as they will kill their own, and so they're against it. But the Jesus film has had a dramatic effect with many Muslims have come to Jesus because of that, because he is in the Quran, and he not divine, but he is one who is part of whom the Muhammad interviewed when he went to heaven. So this is as close as we can get to the spot where Abraham sacrificed Isaac. And all of this would be Aruna's threshing floor when it was bought by David, but the outcropping of bedrock, and how big it was isn't clear, but it's about 10 acres that was added to the 12 acres that was David's city, and so this was the site of the temple, twice the size of the tabernacle. Okay, we will then carry on.